Hi, welcome to the Supply Chain Finance module. This segment will focus on activity-based costing, also known as ABC or ABC accounting. Our objective in this segment is to introduce you to activity-based cost accounting, to review the principles and use of ABC and make you aware of the ABC method. But we're not going to make you an ABC expert. That would require a lot more time and experience. Hopefully, you'll get enough so that you can be conversant on the issues and recognize the importance and the power of an activity-based system. A first question to ask is, why activity-based cost accounting? Well, traditional methods of allocating overhead worked for times where labor comprised a large part of the product cost. Using volume or the amount of labor hours used in a product as a proxy for allocating the smaller overhead costs made sense, and it seemed to provide adequate product cost information for management. Today things are different. Generally speaking, today labor represents a smaller percentage of the product cost, and material and overhead costs represent a higher percentage of the total product cost. In this situation, volume or labor hours would not serve as a good proxy for assessing the consumption of overhead costs. Therefore, it's important to recreate a system that provides a more accurate allocation of overhead to the product costs. Otherwise, management will have inaccurate assessments of the product costs, which may lead to poor product investment decisions. Let's go over a simple example. Assume a children's book company makes two products. One's a standard storybook, and another product is the same storybook that has been tailored in story and design to a specific child. The actual cost to physically produce the product would be approximately the same, but the customized book would require additional software, product design, additional content creation from writers, and would require a different distribution system to deliver the product to the child. In fact, the company offers free shipping for custom orders, so they're not charging for the additional cost to distribute the product. In the most recent month of operation, for example, the company produced and delivered 2,000 books. 1,900 of them were standard and 100 were custom. Now, the company, to offset the additional costs associated with the custom book, they have added $10 to the sales price for a custom product. The overhead costs for distribution center operations are $2,740. Although this includes some costs that are specific to standard books, such as the LTL shipping cost, and some costs that are specific to custom books, which would be the book prep and the direct shipment cost. Now, using the information provided, if the company allocates the DC costs to each book based on volume, which would be kind of a traditional measure, then the overhead cost per book is $2,740 divided by 2,000 units, or $1.37 per book. This spreads all of the costs evenly across each unit. But, of course, as we know, the standard and custom books require different activities that have different costs. We see the custom books use $1,475 of DC activities, specific for custom books, and $65 in pooled activities, meaning that custom book activities consume $1,540 in resources. Now, if we allocate those costs to the custom books, considering that there's 100 books, that results in a $15.40 per unit allocation for custom books. All right, so that means the overhead using an activity-based system would be allocated at $15.40. Well, this is more than $14 higher than what would have been charged using a traditional system, or the $1.37 per book. Additionally, that $15.40 per unit allocation is, of course, more than $5 higher than what the company is recovering in cost through their $10 price increase. So this provides very misleading information. If the business leaders use the traditional allocation method, it's going to lead them to mistakenly believe that their custom book business is very profitable. Again, this is a very simple example to help illustrate how a change is necessary in many instances in order to provide more accurate information to business leaders. Well, as the example suggests, ABC is a cost accounting system that entails allocating overhead costs to cost objects based on the amount of resources that those cost objects consume. And the cost objects consume the resources in various activities. Now, in activity-based costing, cost drivers are used to determine how much of the resources are consumed. Cost drivers take into consideration the activities that are involved in producing a product or service and the resources that are used in those activities. Ideally, the cost driver would serve as a good proxy for the consumption and use of the resources in question. Now, I've used the term cost object here, and I want to explain. A cost object can be a product, a service, a customer, or any other segmentation that a management team desires in order for them to better understand that particular situation. Again, keep in mind, this goes back to the concept that cost accounting systems are there to serve the internal needs and decision support needs for business leaders. In an ABC view, costs come from activities. To understand ABC, consider that any product is going to be created using a variety of activities. Therefore, the total cost of producing that product would be the total cost of all the activities involved. Put another way, each product that the firm creates and offers is considered in terms of a bundle of activities. Now, ABC is especially useful when there's a lot of variety and complexity associated with the production of products. This is the case because with ABC, one can identify costs coming from specific activities that offer a level of detail that the traditional methods of allocating them on the basis of labor hours or machine hours or volume just doesn't permit. When dealing with complexity, I would argue that more detail will provide more accuracy, which will enable better decisions. As a result of this improved accuracy available using ABC, activity-based costing has become one of the more important methods for getting accurate information to support business leaders in their product and service decisions. Let's follow the flow using an activity-based cost system from resources. We see here, think about the indirect costs, represent the resources that are consumed, to the activities, we see 4 activities outlined here, to the products, services, and customers. In this case, the cost object we're thinking of as a series of 3 products, but it could be, as we've suggested before, services or customer segments. Now look, if you go online, you can find lots of examples and a variety of different ways to characterize the ABC flow, but they're all going to basically suggest this general flow. This is a simple one. Of course, it's not the only one. So, what are the basic steps to ABC? As I had mentioned on the previous slide, if you go online, you can find many examples of a variety of steps for ABC. This is just one set, but you'll find that they are fairly similar. Let's walk through each of these briefly. The first step is to identify all the relevant activities. Usually, the costs are described as coming from specific functions: manufacturing, distribution, logistics, order management, order service, etc., and so forth. But with activity-based costing, functions are not generally used. The activity represents a collection of tasks that sometimes include activities from or tasks from different functions. We describe the activities with a specific format. We describe them in terms of a verb followed by a direct object. This should be describing how the work is done, not necessarily by function or department. Now, the second step is identifying the resources consumed in performing the activities. This is done through interview and observation, and it can get tricky because some resources are used in multiple activities. Note that when we're doing an activity-based cost analysis, we do not include unused capacity. The ABC method allocates the costs that are actually used in the production and delivery of the product. Now, if the company elects to have excess capacity, that excess capacity is not considered a relevant cost that ought to be borne by a product. Otherwise, the product costs would be artificially inflated because they would be reflecting the cost of providing the product and service and the cost of carrying the excess capacity. Those require different analyses. In step 3, we start with the resources that were used, which were identified in step 2. Now you know the resources used, identify the costs for those resources, and then collect those into cost pools by activity. The next step is to determine the cost drivers. Really what we're looking for is the best measure of the output of an activity, a single measure. So for example, if the activity is ship product, perhaps the best measure would be the number of orders shipped. Or if the activity is store packages, maybe the best measure would be the number of packages stored. but it could be the number of storage runs made. So it really depends on the situation. From our example, we see that the cost drivers are the number of tests for, let's see here, so the number of tests associated with the test raw materials activity. Or the cost driver is the number of boxes when we're looking at packaging materials. Or the number of CAD hours when looking at design layout. Or the number of items shipped when you're looking at the ship items activity. In step 5, we calculate the cost driver rate. This is very simple. We take the costs that were associated with the activity and then we divide it by the cost driver. From our example, we would divide the cost of test raw materials activity and divide it by the cost driver, which we know to be the number of tests. So if the test raw material activity generated $300 in costs and there were $50 conducted, and there were 50 tests conducted, then the cost driver rate would be $300 divided by the cost driver of 50 tests for a cost driver rate of $6 per test. The last step is to trace the costs to the cost objects using the cost driver rates that we just identified. What we really want to do is identify how much of each activity is consumed by a particular product. So let's look at product C from our example and determine how much of the overhead cost should be allocated to product C. From the graphic, we can observe that product C uses only 2 activities, package materials and ship items. Okay, so we see only two of those particular activities associated with product C. Considering the facts here, there are 50 boxes of product C and there are 5 shipments of product C. We can calculate the cost driver rates to be $3 per box and $7 per item shipped. Therefore, the total cost to allocate to product C would equal the sum of 50 boxes times $3 per box and 5 shipments times $7 per item shipped for a total of $185. This approach would allow us to get a better assessment of the cost for each of these different products based on the activities that they were used to create that service. Product A uses all 4 activities, so its cost allocation may be higher than the allocation for product C that uses only 2 activities. Well, unless the volumes for product C are much higher than that for product A. It really depends on the amount of use and the cost driver rates. Let's talk about key points. Hopefully, this has illustrated how an activity-based cost system can provide much more accuracy in allocation of direct costs. Accuracy in the allocation of indirect costs, especially in environments with a lot of complexity and large expenses, where there's lots of different indirect and support resources with multiple products and customers or custom requirements. The system is designed to capture great detail, but of course it does require additional effort and data. Activity-based cost systems are less important when the product cost has a high labor component or when it's a relatively simple environment where there's a single product or a limited diversity of products or customers or processes or geographies. ABC systems can provide a lot of detail to management that enables them to make product or customer investment decisions with the necessary accuracy. But an important question to ask is, how accurate does our cost reporting system need to be? It's a challenging question that is up for the management to decide. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please use the discussion area. I look forward to seeing you in the next segment. Thank you.